Hello, today we are going to be discussing the 4 quadrants of operant conditioning, as you can see right here. Before we begin, this video is not about classical conditioning. That's a separate topic and we'll cover it in another video. So what is operant conditioning? Operant conditioning is a learning process that allows you to make behavior stronger or weaker based on the consequences that follow them. If an action produces a desirable outcome, the behavior increases. But if an action produces an undesirable outcome, the behavior decreases. That's all it is. Positive reinforcement is when we add something the dog wants in order to increase a behavior. The dog does something we like and we reward it. Because the reward follows the behavior, the dog is more likely to repeating. Basically, it's adding a desirable consequence to strengthen a behavior. Examples: the dog sits, you reward, so sitting increases. Dog comes when called and you reward with a ball, so recall increases. Or maybe dog looks at you, mark and reward, and engagement ends up increasing. Negative reinforcement is when we remove something the dog finds unpleasant in order to increase a behavior. The dog performs the correct action and the pressure or discomfort stops. Because the relief follows the behavior, the dog is more likely to repeat it. So negative reinforcement is simply the removal of something unpleasant to strengthen a behavior. Examples: you apply light leash pressure, dog moves with you, pressure turns off, following increases. Dog sits, spatial pressure stops, so sitting increases. Or maybe dog goes into a heel, e-collar guidance turns off, and the heeling ends up increasing. Positive punishment is when we add something the dog finds unpleasant in order to decrease a behavior. The dog does something we don't want and we apply a consequence. Because that consequence follows the behavior, the dog is less likely to repeat it. So positive punishment simply means adding an unpleasant experience to reduce a behavior. Examples: dog jumps, you apply a leash correction, jumping decreases. Dog bites the leash, you add a verbal no, biting decreases. Dog breaks a stay, you add spatial pressure, breaking stays decreases. Negative punishment is when we remove something the dog wants in order to decrease a behavior. The dog does something we don't want and we take away access to a reward, attention or opportunity. Because the dog loses something valuable after the behavior, that behavior becomes less likely. So negative punishment simply means removing something desirable to reduce a behavior. Examples: dog jumps for attention, you turn away, jumping decreases. Dog bites too hard during play, you stop the game, so biting decreases. Dog screams for food, you remove the bowl, screaming decreases. Dog breaks a stay, you remove the reward opportunity, breaking stays decreases. And those are the 4 quadrants of operant conditioning. Each one simply changes behavior by adding or removing something to increase or decrease the behavior. Thanks for watching. Most people train their dogs every single day without realizing it. Not with commands, but with associations. That's classical conditioning, and it shapes your dog's emotions, confidence, and reactions more than anything else. Classical conditioning is learning through association. One event predicts another, and because of that prediction, the dog develops an automatic emotional response. No thinking, no decision, just emotion. It works like this. You start with a neutral stimulus, something meaningless to the dog. You pair it with an unconditioned stimulus, something the dog naturally reacts to, like food or a sudden noise. After enough pairings, the neutral thing becomes a conditioned stimulus, and now it triggers a conditioned response automatically. Let's use the word yes. At first it means nothing, it's just a sound. But if you say yes right before giving food consistently, the dog starts to predict that food is coming. Eventually the word yes creates a positive emotional response on its own. That's classical conditioning. You're conditioning the dog's emotional state. This happens everywhere. You pick up the leash, dog gets excited. You open the fridge, dog runs over. You grab your keys, dog thinks you're leaving. Doorbell rings, dog gets alert or anxious. None of these are choices, they're emotional predictions built through repetition. People mix this up with operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is about consequences and choices. The dog does something to get something. Classical conditioning is different. It's about emotion. It's about how the dog feels before it even behaves. If you don't control the dog's emotional associations, you don't control the dog's mindset. A dog that's anxious, overstimulated, or fearful isn't choosing those emotions. They're conditioned. But the good news is you can recondition them. You can build calmness, confidence, and neutrality the same way those unwanted emotions were created. So remember, every sound, every movement, every pattern you repeat, you're conditioning your dog. So be intentional, build the emotions you want, not the ones you accidentally create. If you understand classical conditioning, you understand your dog's emotional world. And when you control emotion, you control behavior. What is genetic predisposition in dogs? I'll explain this with an example. If an 8-month-old dog suddenly becomes aggressive, that's not random behavior, that's genetic predisposition kicking in. Some dogs are born with unstable or reactive wiring, and as they mature, those genetics start to express. Training can manage it, but you can't undo what the DNA already set in motion. What is learned behavior? I'll also explain this with an example. If an 8-month-old dog starts acting aggressive because it's been allowed to rehearse bad behavior, that's learned behavior. The dog wasn't born aggressive, it learned that barking, lunging, or snapping gets results. Dogs repeat whatever works for them, so if the environment rewards the behavior, it grows.